My name is Donna Blake, and last weekend at our family reunion, my sister Veronica called me ugly in front of 40 relatives. 3 hours later, her husband Bradley slipped me his business card with his personal number written on the back. What happened next tore our family apart and revealed truths that had been buried for over 2 decades. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Before I tell you how years of being the plain sister led to the most dramatic family confrontation of my life, you need to understand how we got here. Growing up in Meadowbrook, a picture-perfect suburb outside Denver, Colorado, my family looked like something straight out of a lifestyle magazine. Our colonial house sat on 2 acres of pristine lawn, complete with a circular driveway and my mother's prized rose garden that won local competitions 3 years running. My parents, Richard and Patricia Blake, were what you'd call old money elegant. Dad inherited a successful insurance brokerage from his father and built it into the largest independent agency in the state. Mom came from a family of former beauty queens and society women who measured worth in terms of appearance, connections, and social standing. Together, they created an environment where looking perfect wasn't just expected, it was the primary currency of family approval. Veronica, my older sister by 4 years, was born to thrive in this environment. From the moment she could walk, she was stunning in that effortless way that makes people stop and stare. Golden blonde hair that caught sunlight like spun silk, bright blue eyes framed by naturally thick lashes, and the kind of bone structure that photographers dream about. By age 5, she was winning local beauty pageants. By 10, she was modeling for regional department stores. By 15, she had been approached by talent scouts from New York. I arrived 4 years later looking like I belonged to a completely different family. Where Veronica was blonde, I had mousy brown hair that refused to hold any style. Where she had striking blue eyes, mine were an unremarkable hazel that seemed to change color depending on what I wore, never settling on anything particularly memorable. Where she was naturally tall and lean, I was average height, with what my mother diplomatically called a sturdy build. The contrast between us wasn't just physical, it shaped every aspect of our family dynamic from the beginning. Veronica's bedroom was a shrine to her achievements. Pageant crowns, modeling photos, newspaper clippings, and ribbons from various competitions covered every surface. The walls were painted a soft pink that complemented her complexion perfectly, and her walk-in closet overflowed with designer clothes that sponsors and pageant organizers constantly sent her. My room, by comparison, was functional and forgettable. Standard white walls, basic furniture from a department store, and clothes that Mom picked up during end-of-season sales. There were no trophies or ribbons because there were no competitions for being average. There were no professional photos because no one had ever suggested I needed them. The message was clear without anyone having to say it directly. Veronica was the beauty of the family, and I was something else. The something else became more defined as we grew older. I was the smart one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need constant attention or validation. These labels felt like consolation prizes, ways to make me feel valuable without acknowledging that in our family's hierarchy, intelligence and responsibility ranked far below beauty and social success. Family gatherings became showcases for Veronica's latest achievements. Relatives would surround her, asking about modeling gigs, pageant results, and dating prospects. The questions directed at me were different. How are your grades? And are you still on the honor roll? Academic achievements were acknowledged briefly before conversations inevitably returned to Veronica's more glamorous pursuits. My mother's approach to parenting us reflected this dynamic in ways both subtle and obvious. She spent hours helping Veronica perfect her pageant routines, driving her to photo shoots, and networking with other pageant mothers to share tips and opportunities. With me, she focused on what she called practical skills: cooking, budgeting, studying, and organization. She wasn't unkind, but her attention felt like duty rather than delight. The difference in how we were photographed tells the whole story. Veronica had professional headshots taken quarterly, along with portfolio updates and comp cards for her modeling work. These photos were displayed throughout our house, on the mantle, in the hallway, and prominently in my parents' home office. My school photos were tucked into albums that rarely saw daylight, and family photos were carefully arranged to showcase Veronica, while I often appeared partially hidden or slightly out of focus. Shopping trips with my mother became exercises in managing expectations. Veronica's shopping excursions were events, full days spent at upscale boutiques and department stores, trying on designer pieces and building a wardrobe that supported her modeling career. My shopping trips were efficient visits to practical stores, focused on finding clothes that fit well and would last through multiple wash cycles. The most painful part wasn't the difference in treatment, it was how naturally everyone accepted it. Extended family members, family friends, and even strangers seemed to understand instinctively that Veronica was the sister worth paying attention to. At family barbecues, she would be surrounded by cousins wanting to hear about her latest adventures, while I helped in the kitchen or organized activities for younger children. School reinforced these dynamics in different ways. Veronica attended a private academy known for its arts program and flexible scheduling that accommodated her modeling career. The school was full of other students pursuing creative and performance careers, creating an environment where her pursuits were not just accepted but celebrated. I attended the local public high school, which was academically excellent but offered no particular prestige or glamour. Even our extracurricular activities reflected our assigned roles. Veronica participated in activities that enhanced her public presence: drama club, dance team, and student government positions that kept her visible and popular. I gravitated toward behind-the-scenes activities, academic clubs, volunteer work, and part-time jobs that built practical skills but offered little social recognition. The messaging about our respective futures was consistent from early on. Veronica would leverage her beauty and charisma into opportunities that others could only dream of: modeling contracts, acting roles, or marriage to someone successful and prominent. I would succeed through hard work and intelligence, building a stable, if unremarkable, career that valued substance over style. By the time I reached high school, I had internalized these messages completely. I stopped expecting to be noticed for my appearance and focused entirely on academics and practical achievements. I maintained a perfect GPA, participated in community service, and worked part-time jobs that taught me responsibility and work ethic. These accomplishments earned me praise from teachers and college counselors, but they felt invisible compared to the constant celebration of Veronica's beauty and social success. The irony was that I actually enjoyed my achievements. I loved learning, found satisfaction in solving complex problems, and felt genuine pride in helping others through volunteer work. But enjoying something and feeling valued for it are different things entirely. I could excel academically all I wanted, but the family spotlight would always shine brightest on Veronica's latest magazine feature or pageant victory. What made it worse was that Veronica wasn't intentionally cruel. She accepted the family dynamic as natural and deserved, never questioning why she received more attention or better treatment. From her perspective, she was simply living up to her potential, while I was living up to mine. The idea that our potentials might have been defined unfairly never seemed to occur to her. This established pattern would continue through high school, college, and into our adult lives, creating a foundation of resentment and insecurity that I spent years trying to overcome. Neither of us understood then how dramatically things would change, or how a single family reunion would expose truths that had been hidden beneath the surface of our picture-perfect family for decades. The pattern of being overshadowed by Veronica's beauty intensified as we moved through our teenage years and into early adulthood. What started as natural family dynamics during childhood evolved into something more deliberate and painful as we both became aware of our assigned roles. High school was where the differences between us crystallized into something that felt permanent. Veronica's modeling career was taking off seriously by her junior year. She had signed with a Denver agency and was booking regular jobs for local retailers, occasionally traveling to Chicago and Los Angeles for larger campaigns. Her school schedule was constantly adjusted to accommodate photo shoots and casting calls that my parents treated as the most important appointments on the family calendar. Meanwhile, I was elected student body treasurer, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and worked 20 hours a week at a local bookstore to save money for college. These achievements were acknowledged with brief congratulations before conversations inevitably shifted to Veronica's latest booking or magazine appearance. I learned to measure my worth not by recognition from others, but by internal satisfaction with my accomplishments. The most crushing moments came during family events where relatives would make direct comparisons between us. Aunt Helen was particularly brutal in her observations, always delivered with a smile that was supposed to soften the blow. "Veronica gets more beautiful every time I see her," she would announce at holiday dinners. "And Donna, you're getting so mature and responsible. You'll make someone a wonderful wife someday." The subtext was clear. Veronica would be chosen for her beauty, while I might be selected for my practical qualities. My mother's approach to our dating lives reflected these same assumptions. When boys called the house for Veronica, which happened constantly, Mom would chat with them warmly and arrange elaborate group activities or chaperone dates. The few times boys expressed interest in me, her response was markedly different. She would interrogate them about their intentions, academic performance, and family background as though she couldn't imagine why anyone would pursue me unless they had ulterior motives. The summer before my senior year, something happened that crystallized everything I had been feeling but couldn't articulate. Our family took a vacation to Hilton Head, staying at a resort that catered to wealthy families. Veronica spent most of the trip by the pool, effortlessly attracting attention from other guests, while I read books on the beach and helped organize activities for younger kids in our extended family group. On the third day, a photographer who was staying at the resort approached Veronica about doing an impromptu shoot for a travel magazine. Within hours, she was posing on the beach in designer swimwear while a small crowd gathered to watch. The photos would later appear in a national publication, launching her into a higher tier of modeling opportunities. That same day, I had struck up a conversation with the resort's activities director about their youth programs. My suggestions for improving their teen activities were so well received that she offered me a summer job the following year. It was a meaningful opportunity that could have led to valuable experience in hospitality management. But when I excitedly shared the news at dinner, it was overshadowed completely by the magazine shoot. The family's attention was entirely focused on Veronica's unexpected career breakthrough. College applications revealed another layer of our different treatment. Veronica applied to schools known for their arts programs and proximity to major modeling markets. Her applications emphasized her portfolio over academics, and she was accepted to several prestigious institutions that were eager to have a working model to enhance their campus profile. My applications were purely academic, focusing on schools with strong business programs that offered merit scholarships to help offset costs. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The disparity in how our acceptances were celebrated was stark. When Veronica was accepted to Northwestern with a partial scholarship based on her modeling portfolio, my parents threw a dinner party for 20 people to announce the news. When I received a full academic scholarship to the University of Colorado with admission to their honors program, the accomplishment was shared during a regular family dinner with brief congratulations before the conversation moved on to other topics. Moving away to college should have provided relief from constant comparisons, but technology made it impossible to escape. Social media was just emerging during our college years, and Veronica embraced it as another platform for showcasing her modeling career. Her Instagram account attracted thousands of followers who commented on every photo with admiration and envy. My social media presence was minimal and practical, focused on connecting with classmates and sharing academic achievements with a small circle of friends. Family visits during college breaks became increasingly difficult as the gap between our lives widened. Veronica would return home with stories of photo shoots, designer events, and celebrity encounters that dominated family conversations. Her modeling career was providing her with experiences that seemed impossibly glamorous compared to my internships at local businesses and academic research projects. The most painful incident occurred during Christmas break of my junior year. Our parents had invited several family friends over for their annual holiday party, and conversations naturally centered around their children's accomplishments. When discussing Veronica's latest magazine cover, Mrs. Patterson asked about my activities at college. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in with what she clearly intended as a compliment. "Donna is doing wonderfully in school. She's so practical and level-headed, nothing like these flighty girls who only care about their appearance." The comment was meant to praise me, but it highlighted everything I had been feeling about my role in the family. I was valued for being not like other girls, which implied that being like other girls, being concerned with appearance and attractiveness, was somehow lesser. But it also reinforced that I wasn't considered attractive enough to be flighty about my looks, even if I wanted to be. Veronica's romantic life during college added another dimension to our different experiences. She dated a series of successful, attractive men who treated her like a prize to be won. Her boyfriend senior year was the captain of Northwestern's lacrosse team from a prominent Chicago family with model-level looks that matched hers perfectly. Their relationship was the kind that generated envious comments from other women and approving nods from family members who saw it as confirmation that Veronica was living up to her potential. My dating experiences were sporadic and complicated by family dynamics. The few serious relationships I attempted were undermined by my own insecurity about being the plain sister and by family interactions that made those insecurities worse. Bringing boyfriends home meant subjecting them to inevitable comparisons with Veronica's more glamorous romantic choices. Most couldn't handle the family dynamic, and several relationships ended after holiday visits where the contrast between the sisters became too obvious to ignore. Graduation from college marked another milestone where our different paths became more pronounced. Veronica leveraged her modeling experience and Northwestern connections into a position with a high-end fashion public relations firm in Chicago. The job was glamorous, well-paid, and connected her with celebrities and fashion industry insiders. Her life looked like something from a magazine, filled with exclusive events, designer clothes, and influential contacts. My business degree led to a corporate training program with a Fortune 500 company in Denver. The position was stable, well-respected, and offered excellent advancement opportunities, but it lacked any glamour or social prestige. While Veronica was attending fashion weeks and celebrity parties, I was attending professional development seminars and networking events with other business professionals. The family's reaction to our career launches reflected their long-standing preferences. Veronica's PR job was celebrated with a champagne dinner and discussions about all the famous people she might meet. My corporate position was acknowledged as a good, solid choice that would provide security and stability. The language difference was telling. Veronica's career was exciting and full of potential, while mine was safe and practical. Social media continued to highlight our different experiences. Veronica's feeds showed her at industry events, working with photographers, and traveling to exotic locations for shoots. Her follower count grew into the tens of thousands as she built a personal brand around her modeling career and lifestyle. My online presence remained minimal and professional, focused on industry connections rather than personal branding. By our mid-20s, the pattern was firmly established. Family gatherings became predictable exhibitions where Veronica's latest adventures were the main entertainment, while my professional achievements were briefly acknowledged before attention returned to more exciting topics. I had learned to expect this dynamic and found ways to find fulfillment outside of family validation, but the emotional impact accumulated over time. What none of us realized was that this long-standing pattern was building toward a confrontation that would expose truths about our family that had been hidden for decades. The foundation was being laid for revelations that would shake everything we thought we understood about beauty, worth, and the prices we pay for living up to other people's expectations. 3 specific incidents in our late 20s crystallized the full extent of how deeply this family dynamic had affected both our lives and our relationship with each other. Each incident escalated in its cruelty, and each one pushed me further toward a breaking point I didn't even realize was coming. The first major incident happened during Veronica's engagement announcement dinner when I was 26. She had been dating Bradley Morrison for 8 months, a successful real estate developer from an old Denver family with connections that impressed even my parents. Bradley was everything our family valued: handsome in a classic way, financially successful, socially connected, and completely smitten with Veronica's beauty. The engagement dinner was held at the Denver Country Club, with 40 family members and close friends invited to celebrate the announcement. Veronica looked stunning in a designer dress that complemented the massive emerald-cut diamond Bradley had chosen. The entire evening felt like a fairy tale wedding preview, complete with professional photography and a 5-course meal that probably cost more than my monthly salary. During the toasts, various family members shared stories about Veronica's beauty, charm, and the inevitability of her landing such a perfect match. Bradley himself gave a speech about falling in love with the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen and knowing immediately that he wanted to marry her. The room was filled with approving murmurs about what a perfect couple they made. When it came time for family toasts, my father spoke eloquently about Veronica's grace and beauty, bringing joy to everyone who knew her. My mother shared embarrassing childhood stories that somehow made Veronica seem even more endearing. Then Uncle Paul, my father's brother, who had always been particularly tactless, stood up with his wine glass and delivered what he clearly thought was a charming toast. "Looking at these two beautiful people," he began, gesturing toward Veronica and Bradley, "it just proves that some people are born to be together. Veronica has always been the beauty of the family, and Bradley clearly recognizes quality when he sees it. And Donna," he turned toward me with what he thought was an inclusive smile, "well, you've always been the smart one. I'm sure when you find someone, they'll appreciate your other qualities." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence that lasted just long enough for everyone to process what had been said. Then conversations resumed as though nothing had happened, but the damage was done. In front of 40 people, including Bradley, whom I was meeting for the first time, I had been publicly relegated to having other qualities, while Veronica was celebrated for her obvious beauty. What made it worse was the complete lack of acknowledgement that anything inappropriate had been said. No one challenged Uncle Paul's comparison, no one offered a contradictory perspective, and no one seemed to think that publicly categorizing the family daughters as the beauty and the one with other qualities might be hurtful. It was simply accepted as an accurate assessment that everyone understood. The second major incident occurred 8 months later at Veronica's bridal shower, which my mother and her close friends organized at our family home. The event was everything you would expect for someone marrying into Denver society: expensive decorations, catered food, and gifts that probably totaled more than most people's annual salaries. I had offered to help with the planning and execution, taking on many of the behind-the-scenes logistics that made the event run smoothly. I coordinated with vendors, managed the guest list, and handled countless details that ensured everything was perfect. My organizational skills had made the shower possible, but I remained invisible throughout the actual event. During the gift opening portion, Veronica received an incredible collection of luxury items: crystal vases, designer linens, expensive artwork, and kitchen appliances that cost more than my car payment. As she opened each gift, guests cooed over her excitement and made comments about how beautiful everything would look in her new home. Then came the moment that changed everything. Mrs. Wellington, one of my mother's oldest friends, and someone I had known since childhood, made what she obviously thought was a helpful observation. "Patricia," she said loudly for the entire room to hear, "you are so lucky to have one daughter who's beautiful enough to marry well, and another who's practical enough to organize events like this." The room buzzed with agreeing murmurs, as though this was indeed a fortunate family arrangement. I was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a tray of champagne flutes, when I heard this assessment of my role in the family. According to Mrs. Wellington and the approving guests, I existed to make Veronica's life run more smoothly, while she existed to be admired and desired. Veronica's response was what finally broke something inside me. Instead of defending me or challenging this characterization, she laughed and said, "Donna has always been so good at the practical stuff. I don't know what I'd do without her keeping me organized." It wasn't intentionally cruel, but it reinforced that she saw me exactly as everyone else did, the useful sister whose primary value was supporting the beautiful sister's more important life. The third and most devastating incident happened 6 months after Veronica's wedding, during the housewarming party for her and Bradley's new home in Cherry Hills Village. The house was a showpiece, 6,000 square feet of architectural perfection with professionally designed interiors that had been featured in a local magazine. The party was attended by Denver's social elite, including several of Bradley's business associates and their wives, who moved in circles that valued appearance, wealth, and social connections above everything else. I attended reluctantly, knowing that I would spend the evening feeling out of place among people who shared values I had never been able to embrace. The evening was proceeding predictably, with guests touring the house and commenting on Veronica's impeccable taste and Bradley's obvious success. I was standing on the terrace, trying to stay out of the way, when I overheard a conversation between three women who were discussing the hostess.
Veronica is absolutely stunning, said one woman whose diamond bracelet probably cost more than my annual salary. Bradley is so lucky to have found someone that beautiful, who also comes from such a good family. I know, replied another. And she's not just beautiful, she's genuinely sweet. Some gorgeous women can be difficult, but she's lovely to everyone. The third woman, whom I recognized as the wife of one of Bradley's business partners, added the comment that shattered whatever was left of my self-esteem. "It's funny, though," she said, with the casual cruelty that wealthy women sometimes display. "Her sister is so unfortunate looking. You'd never guess they were related. It's like all the beauty genes went to one sister and none to the other." The other women made sympathetic noises, as though my physical appearance was a tragedy that had befallen our family. One of them actually said, "At least she seems nice enough, and I heard she has a good job in business. Some men prefer the practical type." Standing there in my carefully chosen outfit, holding a glass of wine I couldn't afford, listening to strangers discuss my appearance as though I wasn't a person with feelings, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. These women were saying aloud what I had suspected people thought for years, that I was not just less attractive than Veronica, but actually unfortunate looking. And worse, they were discussing this assessment as though it was objective fact rather than subjective opinion. What hurt most was the assumption that my only path to romantic success would be finding a man who preferred the practical type, someone who would settle for my usefulness because he couldn't attract beauty. The idea that I might be desirable for my own sake, that someone might find me genuinely attractive rather than practically acceptable, was apparently inconceivable to these women. I left the party early that night, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely fabricated. Driving home through the expensive neighborhoods where Veronica now lived, I realized that I had spent 28 years accepting other people's assessment of my worth without ever questioning whether they were right. I had internalized the message that I was the practical sister, the smart one, the reliable one, all consolation prizes for not being the beautiful one. That night, lying in my modest apartment that suddenly felt shabby compared to Veronica's mansion, I made a decision that would change everything. I was tired of being the supporting character in my own life. I was exhausted by constantly measuring myself against an impossible standard and finding myself lacking. Most importantly, I was done accepting that my appearance determined my value as a person. The transformation that began that night would take 2 years to complete, and no one in my family would see it coming. By the time they realized what had happened, the family dynamics that had seemed so permanent for 28 years would be turned completely upside down. What none of us understood was that the foundation for everything we believed about beauty, worth, and family roles was about to crumble entirely. The night I overheard those women at Veronica's housewarming party calling me unfortunate looking was the night I stopped accepting other people's version of who I was supposed to be. But the transformation that followed wasn't some dramatic movie makeover montage. It was a systematic, deliberate process that took 2 years of dedication, research, and investment in myself that no one in my family knew about. The first step was admitting that I had been hiding from my own potential. I had dressed conservatively, avoided makeup beyond the basics, and chosen hairstyles that were safe rather than flattering. Part of this was practical. I worked in corporate environments that valued understated professionalism. But a bigger part was protective. If I never tried to look beautiful, I could never fail at being beautiful. That defensive approach had to change. I started small, beginning with a consultation at a high-end salon in downtown Denver that I had walked past hundreds of times but never entered. The stylist, Maria Gonzalez, was honest in a way that was initially devastating but ultimately liberating. "Your hair has incredible potential," she said, running her fingers through the brown waves I had been wearing in the same basic style for a decade. "But you're hiding behind this cut. It's aging you and washing out your complexion. We could do something dramatic that would completely transform your face." The cut and color that emerged from that 6-hour appointment was a revelation. Maria had given me dimensional highlights that brought out golden tones I didn't know existed in my hair, and shaped it into long layers that framed my face in ways that made my features appear sharper and more defined. For the first time in my adult life, I looked in the mirror and saw someone who could legitimately be called attractive. But hair was just the beginning. I invested in a makeup consultation with a professional artist who taught me techniques I had never learned. She showed me how to contour my face to emphasize my bone structure, how to make my hazel eyes appear larger and more striking, and how to choose colors that enhanced rather than muted my natural coloring. The makeup lessons revealed something important. I had good features that had simply been neglected or poorly presented. My eyes, when properly lined and shadowed, were actually quite striking. My skin, with the right foundation and highlighting, had a luminous quality that photographed beautifully. Even my mouth, which I had always considered too wide, became an asset when properly defined with the right lip colors. Skincare became another investment area. I consulted with a dermatologist who created a comprehensive routine involving professional treatments, prescription products, and medical-grade skincare that dramatically improved my complexion over several months. The investment was significant, hundreds of dollars per month, but the results were undeniable. Fitness was the most challenging transformation component because it required completely restructuring my lifestyle. I hired a personal trainer, nutritionist, and committed to a workout schedule that initially felt impossible to maintain alongside my demanding corporate job. Early morning sessions at 5:30 a.m. became routine, followed by carefully planned meals that supported my fitness goals.
The physical changes were dramatic but gradual enough that people didn't notice day-to-day shifts. Over 18 months, I lost 30 pounds while gaining significant muscle definition. My posture improved dramatically as I developed core strength and confidence. Clothes that had hung loosely on my frame began fitting in ways that showcased rather than hid my figure. Shopping for a new wardrobe became an education in understanding my body type and personal style. I worked with a stylist who helped me identify cuts, colors, and silhouettes that flattered my newly transformed physique. The conservative business attire I had worn for years was replaced with pieces that were still professional but infinitely more sophisticated and flattering. The psychological transformation was equally important but harder to measure. I started therapy to address the years of internalized messages about my worth being tied to my appearance. Dr. Sarah Chen helped me understand how family dynamics had shaped my self-perception and developed strategies for building confidence that wasn't dependent on external validation. Working with Dr. Chen revealed patterns I hadn't recognized. I had been unconsciously sabotaging my own attractiveness as a way of maintaining family equilibrium. Being the plain sister was my assigned role, and stepping outside that role felt like betraying family expectations. Learning to prioritize my own happiness over family comfort was revolutionary. Professional development became another transformation area. I enrolled in executive leadership courses, improved my public speaking skills, and began building a network of influential business contacts. The increased confidence from my physical transformation translated into professional assertiveness that led to a significant promotion and salary increase. The most surprising aspect of this transformation was how it affected my dating life. For the first time since college, I began attracting attention from high-quality men who were successful, attractive, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. The difference wasn't just physical. My increased confidence made me more engaging and magnetic in social situations. Dating successful, attractive men was a completely different experience from my previous relationships. These were men who had options and chose to pursue me because they found me genuinely desirable. The validation was intoxicating after years of feeling like I would have to settle for someone who appreciated my practical qualities rather than finding me irresistible. One relationship in particular, with a successful architect named David Rodriguez, became serious enough that I began considering introducing him to my family. David was everything I had never thought I could attract: devastatingly handsome, professionally accomplished, financially secure, and completely captivated by me. Our relationship was passionate and romantic in ways I had never experienced. Throughout this entire transformation, I maintained complete secrecy from my family. During our monthly family dinners and holiday gatherings, I dressed down and styled myself to look more like the old Donna. I claimed my increased confidence came from professional success, which wasn't entirely untrue. The changes were gradual enough that family members didn't notice the dramatic shift that was occurring. Social media became a careful balancing act. I maintained my professional, understated presence on platforms where family members might see, while creating a separate Instagram account under a slightly different name where I documented my transformation journey. This private account attracted thousands of followers who were inspired by my journey from invisible to stunning. The final test of my transformation came when David invited me to attend a charity gala where many of Denver's social elite would be present. This was the same crowd that had attended Veronica's events, the same people who had dismissed me as the unfortunate-looking sister. Attending this event as David's date would mean stepping into Veronica's social sphere as an equal rather than a supporting character. The dress I chose for the gala was a custom piece that showcased the results of 2 years of dedicated transformation. The photos from that evening, taken by professional photographers covering the event, showed a woman who was virtually unrecognizable from the person who had been hiding in shadows at family gatherings. What I didn't realize was that these photos would end up in the society pages of Denver's newspaper and online social coverage of the event. Several family members would see them before our upcoming reunion, setting the stage for a confrontation that would expose everything I had been building toward for 2 years. The reunion was 3 weeks away, and I made a decision that would change our family dynamic forever. Instead of dressing down and hiding my transformation, I would attend as the person I had become. For the first time in my adult life, I would step into a family gathering as someone who refused to be overshadowed or dismissed. What happened next would shatter every assumption my family had made about beauty, worth, and the roles we were supposed to play. The Blake family reunion was scheduled for the first weekend in September at my Uncle Frank's ranch outside Colorado Springs. Every 3 years, our extended family gathered for a weekend of barbecues, games, and catching up. Previous reunions had followed predictable patterns. Veronica would be surrounded by relatives admiring her latest photos and achievements, while I helped with food preparation and logistics behind the scenes. This reunion would be different, though. No one knew it yet. I had decided to attend as the person I had become, rather than the person my family expected me to be. The decision felt both terrifying and liberating. After 2 years of hiding my transformation, I was finally ready to step into family gatherings as my authentic self. The first sign that things would be different came 3 days before the reunion, when my cousin Janet called in a panic. She had seen the society page photos from the charity gala where David and I had been featured prominently among Denver's most attractive couples. The photographer had captured us during cocktail hour, and the image showed me looking genuinely stunning in a way that was impossible to deny or dismiss. "Donna, I saw your picture in the paper," Janet said without preamble when I answered the phone. "Who was that gorgeous woman with you? She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her." There was a long pause when I explained that the woman was me. "That can't be right," she said slowly. "That woman was, she was really beautiful, like model beautiful." The conversation was awkward because Janet was struggling to reconcile the glamorous woman in the photograph with her mental image of her plain cousin. When I confirmed that it was indeed me, she peppered me with questions about my transformation that I deflected with vague answers about personal trainers and professional styling. I could hear the confusion in her voice as she tried to process this information. Word spread quickly through the family network. By the day before the reunion, I had received calls from 3 other relatives who had seen the photos and wanted to confirm what they were seeing. Each conversation followed the same pattern: initial disbelief, followed by awkward questions about how such a dramatic change was possible, followed by transparent attempts to get advance information they could share with other family members. The most telling call came from my Aunt Helen, who had always been particularly invested in maintaining family hierarchies. "Donna, dear," she said, in the overly sweet tone she used when fishing for information, "we saw some lovely photos of you in the society pages. You looked so different. We're all excited to see you at the reunion. I'm sure Veronica will be thrilled to see how you've been taking care of yourself." The subtext was clear. They were all discussing my transformation and trying to understand what it meant for established family dynamics. Veronica was the beautiful one, and my apparent beauty threatened that carefully maintained order. The family was preparing for some kind of confrontation or explanation that would restore familiar patterns. I spent the morning of the reunion getting ready with the same attention to detail I would give to any important professional or social event: professional hair and makeup, a carefully chosen outfit that showcased my transformation while remaining appropriate for a family gathering, and accessories that suggested confidence and success. Looking in the mirror before leaving my apartment, I saw someone who could legitimately be described as stunning. The drive to Uncle Frank's ranch gave me time to prepare mentally for what I knew would be a challenging day. I had spent 28 years playing the role of the plain, practical sister, and abandoning that role would require family members to reconsider assumptions they had held for decades. Some would be happy for my transformation, but others would feel threatened by the disruption of established hierarchies. Arriving at the ranch, I noticed several cars I didn't recognize, indicating that some family members had brought guests or partners I hadn't met. The gathering appeared larger than usual, which meant more people would witness whatever was about to unfold. I parked next to Veronica's luxury SUV and took a deep breath before walking toward the main house where voices and laughter indicated the party was already in full swing. The moment I walked through the front door, conversations stopped. Literally stopped. The 30-plus family members gathered in Uncle Frank's living room turned to stare at me with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to something that looked like suspicion. The silence stretched long enough to become genuinely uncomfortable before my cousin Mark broke it with a low whistle and the words, "Holy shit, Donna." My entrance had created the kind of dramatic moment that would be talked about for years. Relatives who had known me since childhood were struggling to reconcile the woman standing before them with their memories of the plain niece who had always faded into the background. Several people actually stepped closer as though they needed to confirm that I was really who I claimed to be. Veronica's reaction was particularly telling. She had been holding court near the fireplace, surrounded by relatives admiring photos from her recent vacation to the Hamptons with Bradley. When she saw me, her smile froze, and something flickered across her face that I had never seen before: uncertainty. For the first time in our lives, she was not automatically the most beautiful woman in the room. The conversations that resumed after my entrance were stilted and strange. People kept glancing at me when they thought I wasn't looking, whispering to each other behind their hands and making awkward attempts at compliments that revealed their surprise. "You look so healthy," said one aunt. "That's quite a different style for you," observed another relative with obvious confusion. Bradley's reaction was the most interesting and would later prove the most significant. Veronica's husband had always been polite but distant toward me, treating me as an insignificant family member who required minimal attention. When he saw me at the reunion, his entire demeanor changed. His eyes widened, he actually stood up straighter, and he began paying attention to me in ways that were impossible to miss. Throughout the afternoon, I caught Bradley staring at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. When I spoke, he listened with focused attention that was completely different from his previous polite disinterest. During group conversations, he positioned himself to have clear sightlines to me, and he found excuses to join discussions I was a part of even when the topics didn't interest him. The family dynamics shifted throughout the day as people adjusted to my transformation. Some relatives seemed genuinely happy for me, asking about my fitness routine and expressing admiration for my positive changes. Others appeared threatened or confused, as though my improvement somehow diminished their own status within the family hierarchy. Veronica's behavior became increasingly strange as the day progressed. She seemed to be working harder than usual to maintain attention, telling more elaborate stories, laughing louder, and making more dramatic gestures. For the first time in our lives, she was competing for the spotlight that had always been automatically hers. The tension reached a breaking point during the group photo session. That was a tradition at every family reunion. As we arranged ourselves for the formal family portrait, the photographer naturally positioned the most photogenic family members in prominent spots. For the first time ever, I was placed in the front row center, while Veronica was positioned slightly to the side. The symbolism was lost on anyone, especially Veronica. After years of being the automatic focal point of every family photo, she was no longer the unchallenged beauty queen of the Blake family. The photographer's instinctive positioning based on visual appeal had created a new hierarchy that no one knew how to navigate. What happened next would expose years of buried resentment and establish new family dynamics that would never return to their previous patterns. The confrontation that had been building all day was about to explode in ways that would shock everyone present and reveal truths about our family that had been hidden for decades. The explosion came during dinner when the entire extended family was gathered around Uncle Frank's massive oak dining table. Conversations had been flowing awkwardly all afternoon as relatives tried to navigate the new family dynamic my transformation had created. Veronica had been growing increasingly agitated as the day progressed, clearly struggling with no longer being the automatic center of attention. The trigger was seemingly innocent. Our cousin Michael's wife, Rebecca, who was meeting most of the family for the first time, was asking about family history and looking through old photo albums that always came out during reunions. She stopped at a page from 5 years ago that showed Veronica and I at Christmas, representing the stark contrast between us that had defined our relationship for decades.
Oh my God, Rebecca said loudly enough for half the table to hear. Donna, you look like a completely different person compared to these old photos. It's incredible how much someone can change. You're absolutely gorgeous now. The comment was meant as a compliment, but it highlighted everything Veronica had been trying to ignore all day. Veronica's fork clattered against her plate as she set it down with obvious irritation. Well, she said with a bitter laugh that silenced conversations around us, I guess everyone's allowed their ugly duckling phase. Some people just take longer to figure out basic grooming than others. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. 40 family members froze mid-conversation as they processed what Veronica had just said. The word ugly seemed to echo in the sudden silence, and I felt every eye at the table shift between Veronica and me, waiting to see how this family drama would unfold. Excuse me? I said quietly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Veronica doubled down, her voice gaining strength as she continued. I mean, it's great that you finally learned how to use makeup and found a decent stylist, but let's not pretend this is some natural transformation. We all know what you really look like underneath all that effort. The cruelty was breathtaking in its precision. Veronica had found a way to dismiss my transformation while simultaneously attacking my natural appearance and implying that my current beauty was artificial and temporary. She was attempting to reestablish the family hierarchy by reminding everyone of my true place in it. But something had fundamentally changed in me over the past 2 years.
The woman who would have once absorbed this attack silently and retreated to process the hurt privately no longer existed. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor in the continued silence. "You're right, Veronica," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room. "I did have to work for this. I had to invest time, money, and effort into becoming the best version of myself. But you know what's really ugly? Spending your entire life tearing someone else down to make yourself feel better." The family was watching this confrontation with fascination and horror. No one had ever seen us argue openly, and certainly no one had ever heard me challenge Veronica directly. Aunt Helen actually had her hand pressed to her chest as though she might faint from the tension. "I'm not tearing anyone down," Veronica shot back, her face flushing red. "I'm just being honest about reality. You can't just suddenly become beautiful because you hired some professionals. Real beauty is natural." "Like yours?" I asked, with a smile that held no warmth. "The beauty that comes from 15 years of professional photography, designer clothes paid for by mom and dad, and a modeling career that taught you how to work angles and lighting? That kind of natural beauty?" The observation hit its target. Veronica's mouth opened and closed without sound as she realized that I had just exposed the same artifice in her appearance. The difference was that her artifice had been supported and celebrated by the family, while mine had been hidden and achieved independently. Bradley, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly stood up. "I think maybe we should all take a breath," he said, but his eyes were fixed on me rather than his wife. Throughout the day, his attention toward me had become increasingly obvious, and this moment of family tension seemed to embolden him further. "Actually," Bradley continued, "I think Donna looks amazing. The transformation is really impressive." The way he said impressive while looking directly at me made several family members shift uncomfortably in their seats. His comment was inappropriate given the context and his relationship to Veronica, but he seemed oblivious to the impropriety. Veronica's face went from red to white as she processed her husband's public compliment of her sister during their argument. "Bradley," she said sharply, "this is between me and Donna." "Right," he said, but the damage was done. Everyone had heard him defend me against his own wife, and the implications were obvious to anyone paying attention. The dinner dissolved into awkward small conversations as people tried to pretend the confrontation hadn't happened. But the family dynamic had shifted permanently. I had publicly challenged Veronica's authority and demonstrated that I was no longer willing to accept the role of the inferior sister. More disturbingly, her own husband had sided with me in front of 40 witnesses. As the evening progressed, Bradley's behavior became increasingly problematic. He found excuses to approach me throughout the night, complimenting my appearance, asking about his fitness routine, and engaging in conversations that were too personal given our relationship. When I mentioned my career advancement, he seemed genuinely impressed and asked detailed questions about my professional achievements. The most shocking moment came as families were beginning to say their goodbyes. I was standing near my car, loading leftover food that Aunt Margaret had insisted I take, when Bradley approached me alone. Veronica was inside saying extended farewells to relatives, and most other family members were distracted with their own departure preparations. "Donna," he said, looking around to ensure we weren't being observed, "I wanted to apologize for Veronica's behavior tonight. She's been stressed lately." "She's been like this our entire lives," I replied, continuing to pack my car while avoiding eye contact. "Look," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "I know this is going to sound inappropriate, but I'd really like to get to know you better. The real you, not just the family version." He pulled out a business card and quickly wrote something on the back before handing it to me. I looked down at the card to see his personal cell phone number written in blue ink. The implications were staggering. Veronica's husband, at a family reunion, was giving me his private number and suggesting we meet outside of family gatherings. The betrayal was so profound that I actually felt dizzy. "Bradley," I said carefully, "you're married to my sister." "I know," he replied, "but things aren't always what they seem from the outside. Maybe we could just talk sometime, as friends." The word friends was delivered with enough emphasis to make his actual intentions clear. This wasn't about friendship. This was about a man who had been attracted to beauty his entire life, suddenly realizing that his wife's, formerly plain sister, had become more beautiful than his wife. Before I could respond, Veronica's voice called out from the house. "Bradley, where are you? We need to go." Her tone suggested she was already suspicious about his whereabouts. "Think about it," he said quickly, then jogged back toward the house as though nothing had happened. I stood in the gathering darkness, holding his business card and trying to process what had just occurred. In the span of one evening, I had publicly confronted my sister about years of cruel treatment, watched her husband defend me against her, and received what amounted to a proposition from my brother-in-law at a family reunion. The drive home gave me time to consider my options. I could pretend the card exchange never happened and try to return to some version of normal family relations. I could tell Veronica about her husband's inappropriate behavior and create an even larger family crisis. Or I could use this situation to finally establish that the family dynamics that had oppressed me for 28 years were permanently over. By the time I reached my apartment, I had made my decision. I would not be returning Bradley's interest. I had too much self-respect to get involved with my sister's husband, regardless of how our relationship had deteriorated. But I also would not be protecting Veronica from the consequences of her husband's wandering eye or her own cruel behavior. The reunion had accomplished something I hadn't expected. It had forced everyone in my family to see me as I really was, rather than as they had always assumed I would be. The pretty sister who had been hiding under poor grooming and family expectations had finally emerged, and the established order could never be restored. 3 days later, Veronica called me in tears. Bradley had confessed to giving me his number, though he claimed it was innocent. She wanted to know if I had contacted him and what I intended to do with the information. For the first time in our relationship, she needed something from me more than I needed anything from her. That phone call would mark the beginning of a completely different relationship between us, one where she could no longer assume her superiority or take my loyalty for granted. The family reunion had ended the era of Veronica as the unquestioned beauty queen and Donna as the invisible supporting character. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop accepting the role others have assigned you and force them to see who you really are. Sometimes transformation isn't just about changing yourself, it's about changing how everyone else sees you and what they think they can get away with. The Blake family would never be the same, and for the first time in my life, that felt like exactly the outcome I had been working toward. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.